Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast, the first monster, and I mean monster, M-O-N-S-T-E-R in all caps, emergency show of the year in terms of a shocker. The one on New Year's Day was somewhat predictable that we did, but this is one that I have to do. The most shocking news, let alone sports news of the entire year so far, Nick Saban retiring as the head coach of Alabama. 6 national titles with Bama. He had 1 with LSU. Like I said, it's an absolute shocker of news that just came down about 20 minutes ago from ESPN college football reporter Chris Lowe. This is just something that totally came out of the ordinary. This was a really, really well-kept secret. There's no speculation about this. I feel like there would have been louder speculation about this just a little bit had Alabama won the title. But they lost, and everybody just assumed that Nick was coming back, and the news literally broke not even 20 minutes ago that Nick Saban has decided to hang it up and call it a career. This is just shocking in every which way you look at it. I'm going to talk about other coaching firings maybe at the end of the show from the NFL that we have to talk about. But this is the biggest story in sports of the entire year. And now the question is, who will replace Nick at Alabama? The early name that you're seeing right now is Oregon head coach Dan Lanning. I don't think that's the best hire, personally. Dan Lanning has done a nice job at Oregon. He, in 2 years, 22-5, which is impressive. But the issue here is that in those 2 seasons, they did not win a conference title. But I understand that you don't need to win a conference title right away. But, his team's choked in big spots 2 years in a row. And that's my only concern with Lanning, although it is very early in his career. But the only tie he has to Alabama is he was a grad assistant there in 2015, and that was a season where Bama won the title. And that was one of Nick's better coaching jobs, so he's worked under Nick as a grad assistant. But you got to think that Nick's still going to be involved in the program somehow, like how Krzyzewski's involved at Duke and basketball still. So you think that Saban's still going to be kind of around, and Roy Williams is still with Carolina in some degree. So I expect to see this with Nick with Alabama. So Dan Lanning looks like the guy that most people are talking about. I think the guy that they should hire is Clemson head coach Dabo Swinney. Dabo Swinney is tailor-made for this job. He played at Bama. He was a grad assistant there. He coached there until he went to Clemson in 2003 and became their wide receiver coach and an assistant head coach. And then he was an intern coach and offensive coordinator in 2008, and he took over Clemson in 2009 and turned them into a powerhouse in the ACC. But Dabo, the last 2 years, Clemson has not been very good by their standards. Only 20-7 in the last 2 seasons. And I genuinely believe that Dabo is best equipped to coach Alabama to where they belong, and that is the top. And those are their standards. I know Greg Byrne has some work to do, whether it's Dabo. Like I said, Dan Lanning, I wouldn't love that hire for them because I think they could do better than Dan Lanning, although Lanning has done a good job with Oregon. But there's a Pac-12 soon-to-be Big Ten coach that I would eye, and that's Kalen DeBoer at Washington. Kalen DeBoer, all he does is win, and he gets the most out of his teams. Obviously, DeBoer starts in Seahawks Falls. Then he was a high school assistant coach. Back to Seahawks Falls for another 9 years as their offensive coordinator and then their head coach. And then he moved up to the FBS level and was offensive coordinator at Southern Illinois. Actually, that's FCS. And then went to FBS in 2014, was with Eastern Michigan as offensive coordinator, coach, and of quarterbacks. Same with Fresno State. Then Indiana. Then he was the head coach at Fresno State for a couple years. And then Washington. He's 104-12 overall. This guy, I think, deserves it more than Dan Lanning in that conference. Would Lincoln Riley make the move to Alabama? I think that's a name that we have to watch. I think that this is like in anybody's game. This is a gold jewel job in professional sports. And I think this is the biggest job that's been open in years without a ready-made replacement. Because obviously John Shire was the ready-made replacement for Coach K. Hubert Davis kind of was the ready-made replacement for Roy Williams at North Carolina. I know I'm bringing college basketball into this, but it's a good comparison. But Nick never had the guy picked out. So it's going to be interesting to see if they even look on their staff. I mean, Steve Sarkisian is being mentioned. I wouldn't really go there. I think Steve Sarkisian, outside of this year at Texas, like he flopped at USC. I mean, he was a good offensive coordinator for Bama, but I don't think that him as their head coach, I feel like they could do better than Sark. Lane Kiffin was also working under Nick at one point from 2014 to 2016, so we won one title as the OC before coaching Florida Atlantic for a couple years to redeem himself and revive his career, and then he went to Ole Miss where he's been money. So Lane Kiffin, I think, would be an excellent hire for Bama. I would put him probably as my number 2 candidate behind Dabo. And then Kalen DeBoer has to be up there. And then either Sark or Dan Lanning. But I don't get the Dan Lanning thing. I mean, he was only a grad assistant there for 1 year. Like, to me, it's Dabo. And then you can make your case for 2 to whatever on the list. Trying to think of other guys that could be in play. How about Kirby Smart? Wouldn't it be, like, really Alabama of them to, like, overpay to get Kirby Smart out of Georgia? I think Kirby would be another fantastic hire. He'd probably be like a 1A, 1B to Dabo. But I don't think Kirby to Bama is realistic. So that's why I would not put him on the list. I wouldn't put Ryan Day or Jim Harbaugh on the list because I think Harbaugh's going to the NFL. And I think Ryan Day is going to be at Ohio State for a little longer. So there's some other guys that maybe could be in play. I mean, I don't think Brian Kelly will leave LSU yet. He's making some changes to his staff. There's some rumors about Marcus Freeman of Notre Dame, which 19-8 at Notre Dame, or is it 19-8 as a coach? As a coach. Yeah, 19-8. So he's been there since 2021. Okay, so he just finished his third year there. There's no Bama ties for Marcus Freeman. I don't know if he's the right guy for this job too, but Bama absolutely needs to nail this hire. To me, the best guy for the job is Mr. Dabo Swinney, and then Kirby Smart if they could find a way to get him. And then Kalen DeBoer or Lane Kiffin, of course. I'll go Kiffin 3, DeBoer 4, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not a big Lanning fan, but he's done a nice job at Oregon. But maybe I guess I'd put him 5 or Sark, depending how you feel about them. But yeah, what a career for Nick at Bama. He got there in 2007 after his failed stint with the Dolphins. And then he won in 2009, 2011, 2012. So he had a repeat in there. 2015, 2017, and 2020 seasons. So, and obviously 03 was at LSU. And could have won it this year had they get the ball in OT. And that would have been a fun way for Nick to ride into the sunset with a possible win over Michigan and a win over DeBoer, who could replace him in Tuscaloosa and Washington. So, now you ask me what's next for Nick. Like I said, I think he's still going to probably chill, lay low, maybe stick around the Bama program in some, like, low-key role like Coach K does with Duke and what Roy Williams does in North Carolina in basketball. So, just got to keep our eyes on that. And then the other coaching thing that happened today was that Pete Carroll was let go as head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. I'll touch on this very briefly. This was not that stunning to me. It was stunning to a lot of people, but not really to me. There's been some rumblings about Pete Carroll potentially moving on. I just feel the time run its course with Seattle and Pete Carroll. They underachieved this past season after not making the postseason. They went 9-8, but they're kind of like the Giants a little bit. But the difference is that Seattle played in a weak division, and the Giants played in the division with the Cowboys and the Eagles. Those were the difference between the two teams, and the Giants had a shit ton of injuries, and Seattle had some injuries too, but they had a little bit better quarterback play than the Giants, but not by much. But they have more offensive firepower than the Giants, and that's why they won a few more games than the Giants. But the favorite for the Seahawks job looks like it's going to be Cowboys defensive coordinator and former Seahawks defensive coordinator Dan Quinn. Who I'm not a fan of. He was terrible in Atlanta. Yeah, he made a Super Bowl, but that was just like some fluke year. And I know Green Bay was good that year, and they probably were the favorites to go to the Super Bowl that year. Matt Ryan won the MVP. And Dan Quinn had a good defense in Atlanta. He did. But I just don't think that he could have I reminded you I was in a Super Bowl kind of thing, kind of like how Doug Peterson has had a little bit, but he obviously had a disappointing year this year. But like I said, we'll see if it's Dan Quinn or they go elsewhere. Maybe Shane Waldron gets promoted. Maybe they look at Ben Johnson. Maybe they look at Todd Monken. Maybe they look at someone from the Niners. I don't think Bobby Slowick of the Texans is going to get an opportunity yet. Surprised Mike Kafka's getting a lot of interest. And the Giants are an offense and a team that underachieved this past year. And obviously I'm referring to the report that came out about the Titans requesting to interview him. So it's going to be an interesting few weeks, obviously, in the NFL. And, of course, especially in college with the Saban bombshell. And now the question is, where does Jim Harbaugh go? Does he stay in Michigan? I don't think he'll be a candidate at Bama. That'd be too weird. And then, or will he go to the Raiders or somebody else, the Chargers? The Bears announced today that they will be retaining Matt Eberflus, but they fire offensive coordinator Luke Getsy. That was probably the move to make. I think Eberflus saved his job at the end of the year, just like Justin Fields probably saved his job as well. Because to me, the fact that they're keeping Eberflus tells me that they're probably going to keep Justin Fields. Had they gotten rid of Eberflus, that would not have been a good sign for Justin Fields. So, Luke Getsy out of a job in Chicago. And now they're going to be looking for a new offensive coordinator. And then a guy that I think should be looked at is Jim Schwartz. He's the Browns defensive coordinator, but I know he had some interesting years with the Lions, but could he get another shot? Maybe. We'll see. So, a lot of big football news that I had to touch on today with Saban, obviously retiring, and Pete Carroll getting fired. And obviously we talked about Vrabel on the show either this morning or yesterday. So that's obviously humongous. Jim Harbaugh's obviously a huge deal. So we got to keep our eyes on that. And when we do the show tomorrow, we'll talk more about everything that we just did a short little emergency show on with Saban, Carroll, and more. Maybe we get Belichick news this week too. Just keep our eye on that, and maybe Vrabel goes to New England. So the coaching carousel is taking a lot of weird and interesting directions. And obviously the NFL and college are going to be connected because of the possibility of Jim Harbaugh making the jump, and then Michigan becomes open. So that's another big job to watch. And then whoever gets Bama, that job that the person that gets Bama leaves will be open as well. That could be Clemson, that could be Oregon, that could be Georgia. That could be Texas. That could be USC. That could be Washington. You could just make a list, for crying out loud. Alrighty, so we'll be back tomorrow, obviously, with the regular show, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your night.